Today on Spectre Creative, we're going to talk about signs. Well, specifically, we're going to talk about warning signs. My name is Scott ToyGuru Neitlich. I've been in the toy industry for over 20 years, and uniquely to being a professional, I'm also a collector. And that gives me a bit of a unique perspective. And I want to answer questions that have come up a lot about toy safety and how that works and how kind of toy warnings work and how they dictate design. So let's kind of jump in. I mean, obviously everyone knows what this is, right? It's a red octagon that has some letters and you have to do something when you get to it. I don't know, probably like not do something, like stop. And, then of course there's the famous silhouette of a cow, which means that there's going to be coordinated cow dancing in front of you, which, is a common sign, I think, probably in Alaska. What I want to talk about specifically, though, are warning signs on action figures and on toys, and kind of trying to deep dive into how those work and how you know what signs need to get put on. Yeah, I mean, for example, if it's a Velociraptor, you have to have an electric fence warning sign on all Velociraptor action figures. But no, I'm just kidding. But what about this one? You seen this one before? Does this mean like, danger, happy lions inside? Or, do not feed the lions this toy because the lion could choke? I know, it's crazy. Like, this is actually a UK safety symbol for toys. And there's a whole bunch of them. There's international symbols, there's US symbols, there's age grade, there's electric symbols. And navigating what needs to be on a toy also dictates the design of that toy and what can go into it. There's even special warnings just for special toys. I mean, if you have, something like lawn darts or a samurai sword, you may have to put on a unique safety sign just for that toy, besides the standard ones. So lots of ways of doing this, but let's jump into kind of the common ones and dissect how different safety signs dictate toys. Now the most common one, this one, the choking hazard. This toy is a marble, not suitable for children under 3. Well, this is specific to a marble, but if you look at most action figures, especially action figures that have things like blasters or guns or alternate hands, things that are smaller than, say, the figure's arm. Well, those toys are going to have the standard small warnings part, and it's got to be prominent on the front of the toy. So in the case of Marvel Legends, you can see it here. No mention about marbles, but it does say choking hazard, small parts, not for children under 3. So how do we get there? Well, first we have to talk about general toy testing, and there's a few ways toys are tested by large toy companies. I think one of my personal favorites is the setting toys on fire. And no, I'm not talking about Sid in Toy Story when he's torturing Woody with a magnifying glass or, doing, horrible stuff to toys. I'm actually legitimately talking about toy companies taking toy product and putting a blowtorch to it. And this is done all the time. In fact, every single toy Mattel makes goes through this process. There's a special room in the testing center, and toys are lit on fire to make sure that nothing, they're not going to release bad chemicals, they're not going to explode, they're not going to turn into Johnny Storm and fly out the window. Another standard test is what's called the pull test. And this is where it's determined how many pounds of pressure it takes to separate a toy. This is very common not just on fluffy toys, but on action figures as well. So, how many pounds of pressure will it take before the arms will rip off? I mean, eventually you're going to get to a point, but if it's below a certain tier, then it's safe because a child is not capable of pulling, say, 200 pounds of pressure. I mean, of course, there's going to be toys that, this sort of doesn't work for, like, Stretch Armstrong here, but that's an entirely different story altogether. For your standard action figure, you're going to want to make sure it tests under a certain amount of pressure so that your average child or your average man-child or woman-child, adult collector, cannot just casually yank the arms off. And then finally, one of the standard tests is what's called the drop test. And this involves both dropping it in package, out of package, in master cartons, and loose to see if small parts are going to break off of it, or if things are going to break off, like limbs, or large sections are going to fall apart. So unless it's a Lego product that's meant to fall apart if it smashes, it's going to have to pass a drop test in numerous ways. So all of this is obviously done to protect children. Hopefully adult collectors who are buying toys are old enough, wise enough, smart enough to know not to strangle themselves with an octopus toy or, shove small parts in their mouth. And parents of kids often think that there should be even more warnings on toys, that they should have, all sorts of things, even telling them that, this toy is way too loud and you don't want it in your house because it's going to make buzzing sounds. If you have kids, you know about that. Toy safety has come a long way. I mean, back in the 50s, this is one of my favorite examples, the atomic kit for kids that actually came with uranium. Yeah, they sold children a small dose of uranium in the 1950s. We've definitely come a long way from that. I mean, even in the 80s, there were lots of toys with caps, those little red things you see on the right side. In this case, a Masters of the Universe figure, Thunder Punch He-Man, where you would take the caps, put them in his back, and then through moving his arm backwards and then releasing, it would break the caps and cause smoke. And honestly, caps are a small form of gunpowder. So we're selling children gunpowder. And yeah, you can see why this doesn't happen anymore, and you can't really find toys with caps anymore. So where did this all come from? When did toys start getting all these safety marks? Well, a good place to look is this book, Toys That Kill. Now, it's an interesting book. I've read it multiple times. It came out in 83, 84. And this is why before 83, 84, you don't see as many warnings, and afterwards you do. This book really did change the toy industry. And now you'll note what's on the cover of this book. Those Fisher-Price little people there, right? Well, that's actually really important because previously to this book, little people were everywhere. They looked like this. They were, pegs with heads. But as the book notes in a few chapters, there were parents who gave these to infants, basically children under 6 months old, and they did unfortunately choke on them. Now, I think in today's world, you would never dream of giving a toy like this to a 6-month-old or a 3-month-old, but I guess parents need to be told what to do. And so picture the summer of 84, 85, and every mother sitting around the pool reading this book, Toys That Kill, with big pictures of the little people right on the cover. Yeah, you could see why Mattel kind of felt they needed to change the little people after that. Even though these completely test fine, for 3+, because there were some parents giving them to infants, Mattel changed the little people because of this book, because they were on the cover of this book, into more squishy, larger characters. I think that if they weren't on the cover, this probably wouldn't have happened. But, you can picture all those, parents sitting around the pool and all of them with this book with little people on the cover with the words Toys That Kill. You can understand why Mattel wanted to change little people and they turned them into this, which are a lot different. And unfortunately, they no longer work with all the vintage playsets. And honestly, I think that's kind of a shame because the vintage toys had what I call pin play, meaning they could do things like go down slides and pop into vehicles and go on swings and things that the new little people can't really do. Going down those trap doors and shooting out the other side like the Sesame Street set, which is one of my favorite toys ever. I still have this one. And because of, that book, those had to go away. They were brought back, at least the form factor was brought back by Entertainment Earth briefly, as Pinmates, as licensed product for adult collectors. I was actually working on this for a while. I was a big fan, and hopefully this line will still continue to go, because it's a really cute way to collect for adults, and has that nostalgia feel. Plus, they work with the vintage playsets, because they have that pin shape, which is awesome. All right, but I'm off track. So we're talking about toy safety, and we couldn't do a video about toy safety if we weren't addressing the legendary free Boba Fett with jetpack firing missile that didn't have a jetpack firing missile when it arrived in your mailbox, even though it was advertised as having this feature. And why is that? Because of this toy, the Battlestar Galactica Colonial Viper from Mattel. This was the toy that fired a missile out the bottom, and unfortunately a child fired it into their mouth and unfortunately, yes, did hurt themselves. So because of this toy, well, one, Mattel reissued it and slapped a nice big red sticker on it saying, danger, does have a firing missile. And I noticed that they cover the missile in the graphic with the sticker. But this was the toy. This was the one that made Kenner change Boba Fett. All right, so speaking of Star Wars, you like how I did that? Let's look at the emergence of the small parts warning, which is the most common toy warning. So if you look at toys previous to '84, before that book came out, Toys That Kill, you will notice there is no small parts warning. Even though, Yoda has his small cane and his small snake, it just says ages 4 and up. Versus flash forward to today, the exact same toy issued in 2020 as part of the Retro Walmart series. Same toy, no changes to it, same small parts. Well, lo and behold, there in the top corner, bright and prominent, is the standard small parts warning. So where did this come from, and how do you know when something's a small part and needs this warning on it? And this did come from the book and the legislation. So this is one of my favorite toy tools. This small little clear container with a slant in the inside kind of bucket, if you will. It doesn't go straight down. It's got a nice slant there about 2/3 of the way down. So this is an official Toy Industry of America small parts container. It is probably the single most important toy making tool that toy companies have, because obviously the most important thing is to protect children. No one ever wants to see a toy hurt a child, except maybe, the Chucky movies, but it's a different story altogether. So this clear kind of measuring cup device, it's about 1.5 inches tall by about 1/2 inch wide at the lip there, with a slanted bottom inside. This is distributed to toy engineers to know if something is small. So if it fits inside, small part. If it can't fit inside, not a small part. So Yoda, not a small part. Baby Yoda, small part. See how that works there? Green Lantern ring, small part. Funko Pop, not a small part. Pinmate, also not a small part, sticks out the top, has to be completely inside. He-Man's Power Sword, not a small part. Lego brick, small part. And it's as simple as that. If it doesn't poke out the top, it's a small part. If it goes all the way in, but if it in any way pokes out the top, not a small part. And that is how to know if it needs these warnings. So the line mark is for Europe, CE is for America. There's electrical warnings as well, if something's going to explode, but hopefully toys won't explode. And the 0 through 3 clearly showing it is not for infants. All of these marks came out of legislation after the publication of that book in '84. I hope this clarified the origin of toy warnings and how they're decided. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below and I'd be more than happy to address. I'll see you guys at the next video on Spectre Creative with me, Scott ToyGuru Neitlich. Thanks for subscribing and watching.